Hello and welcome back to Big Les's League and all rugby league experience. Welcome to the first episode of the Halftime Chat. I am your host, Big Les, and I've got with me the one and only Lee Addison. How are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. How are you, Big Les? I love that name.
I love it too. I'm good, thanks. So basically what me and Lee are going to be doing is going through these slides. We're going to go through three teams today, being St. George, Canberra, and Brisbane. And we're sort of going to give you guys a bit of a rundown into how their season is going to look going into 2022. Bit of stats, key signings and losses as well. It's going to be a pretty interesting little chat. So before we get kicked off, I know that you're doing the Aim Higher program at the moment with a few young guns. Give us a rundown about what that's about, how that got started up and stuff like that.
So basically, a few years ago, Les, I decided that I felt that not enough people were getting good enough quality coaching. So I'm a level 3 high performance experienced coach, and there's only a small group of players can ever get coached by a coach like me traditionally. So I decided to flip that around. I devised a website, rugbyleaguecoach.com.au, that soon became the biggest in the rugby league world. And then during COVID, started doing a lot of one and small group sessions because of the restrictions. And I've had the Aim Higher program planned for 12, 13 years, believe it or not. I used to run it at some clubs that I worked at just with their own juniors as part of my coaching gigs. And I just decided to run with it from last January. So I was still a head coach at Maple Park at the time. So I was doing this part-time. Did a couple of clinics. It went really well. This year I'm full-time on the Aim Higher program and rugbyleaguecoach.com.au. We've rolled out to about 13 different venues so far already, including every point of the compass in Brisbane. We're going to Bundaberg soon. We'll be down in Melbourne, down in Sydney, and then over to the UK. Looks like we might be going up further north into higher parts of Queensland, higher and hotter parts of Queensland as well. So anybody who's listening out there, I mean, if you want something like that at your joint, then just feel free to reach out.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I tell you what, if I was at some of those venues, I'd definitely be going there and giving it a crack as well. It's a great.
I don't know if you're a bit too old, Les.
Oh, I'm not too old. I'm 17 and going.
Now we'll take you because we basically go from age 6, believe it or not. Ideally, the 7 or 8 year olds, but some 6-year-olds are up to it. And so we go 6 to 17, basically 17, 18. Mate, if you want to come on one, feel free.
I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to. And just give us a bit of a rundown, sort of the clubs you've coached at. Give us a bit of an insight into Lee Addison as well.
Well, I've been at a couple of NRL clubs, Manly Seagulls and Penrith Panthers. I was on the SG Ball staff and head coach of the Harold Matthews side at Manly, then went over to Penrith. A couple of years as Harold Matthews coach there, and also assisted Matt Elliott with the first grade side during my summer breaks from school. We all got sacked by Gus Gould, but luckily for me, I had some other irons in the fire. I've been with the USA, helped them qualify as assistant coach in 2011 for the 2013 World Cup. And at the same time as all that was going on, I was involved in the schoolboy game. So head coach of St. Gregory's for a few years, and then started 2 big academies in Queensland, the Ipswich State High Academy, which is a huge academy now. We took them from the 3rd division to the 1st division after 2 years undefeated, and they've stayed there for the best part of the last decade. And then 2017, I moved over and did the same at Maple Park, took them from the 3rd to the 1st division, and they're hoping to qualify in the next couple of weeks again. And prior to that, I was doing quite a lot in England too, mate. As you can tell with this accent, I wasn't originally of this parish, so
Really?
yeah,
I've been
yeah. I've been here a long time now, mate. So it is home. It is home, or at least one of them, anyway.
Yeah, good stuff. Make sure you go and go to the rugbyleaguecoach.com as well. If you want to get into those programs, it'd be a great little thing to do, especially if you're an up-and-comer and you want to get a few rugby league skills down pat. So we're going to analyse, the first team we've got here to analyse is the St. George Illawarra Dragons. Just before we get started, what do you think about the St. George going into 2022?
I think they're going to have a far better season. I think there were green shoots of recovery in 2021 before Barbecue Gate. I have a lot more faith in Anthony Griffin, the coach, than some people seem to have. I think because he presents in press conferences and media interviews, he sounds a bit old school. People just assume he's old school in his approach. I think there are some old school elements to what he does, but I think what he is doing is really shaping his roster in such a way that they're going to make a better challenge in 2022. Like I said, if it wasn't for Barbecue Gate last year, then I think they might have scraped into the finals. In the off-season, they've recruited quite a few older heads. Alex Ferguson, the old Manchester United manager, the very famous Manchester United manager and very successful manager, used to talk about building your squad where you basically split it into thirds. You have promising youngsters coming through. You have a group of people in their peak. So if you imagine your peak in rugby league, it'd be something like 26 to 29 kind of thing, maybe 25 to 29. And then a few older heads, sort of 29 to 31, 32, 33. And if you look at some of the recruits, Les, that the Dragons have brought in the off-season, Tau Moga, 28, outside back. Jack, I can never say his surname. How do I say it?
Gajeski?
That'll do. Well done.
As well.
Jack G, 27, a back rower. George Burgess, 29. Aaron Woods, 30. They've basically put a new front row in there. And Moses Sully and Jaden Sewer are both at the younger end of the scale. They're sort of like at the end of being young players. So I think the way they've put that, or started to put that roster together, is actually okay. And I know there's a lot of people writing them off. I think they're underestimating the coach, and I think they're underestimating the recruitment. I think St. George are specials for the 8. What say you?
I like St. George, and I thought they were playing really good footy right up until, as you said, the barbecue little incident happened. I thought they were playing some great footy, and I honestly thought they were going to make the top 8 last year as well. But it was quite unfortunate that happened. It sort of really, really damaged the morale at the club at the back end of the season. Guys weren't really hyped to win games, and yeah, that's just what happened. It wasn't a very good end to the season for St. George. As you say, the Moneyball approach that they've gone with is quite interesting, but it is a good one. I didn't even know Gajeski was 27. I thought he was quite young. I hadn't seen him before. But yeah, the Moneyball idea, getting some older heads in there, it's not a bad idea at all. We'll have a look at some more of the signings, the losses, and stuff like that here now as well. Some of the signings: Tau Moga, Moses Sully, Jack Gozaweski. I'm gonna stuff. We're both gonna stuff that up.
I won't get the next one wrong. I think I've coached him. I coached him in England, I think. I coached one of the Burgess boys. I think it was
George Burgess, Aaron Woods, and Jaden Sewer. Losses: Corey Norman, Matt Duffy, who I think was a huge loss for them, Cam McInnes, and Jordan Pereira. The win ratio last year was 8 wins, 16 losses. Key players for 2022: Ben Hunt, Tyrell Sloan, Jaden Sullivan, Talatau Amon, who some people call him Junior Amon. What are your thoughts? Who do you think are some key players in that side for 2022?
The big thing that interests me, mate, is Matt Duffy. Now, don't forget, while he was having a hiatus from coaching, Hook was in the media. He was at the ABC and he was doing some work for Fox League, particularly on NRL 360 and the like. Also, one of his assistants last year was Matthew Elliott, who was with the ABC. So I think St. George, as a coaching staff, are quite good at getting their messages out to the media. And I think you'll find, if you look back through some of the commentary last year, people were sort of suggesting in the media that Matt Duffy wasn't quite as good a defensive fullback. Isn't the kind of defensive fullback that Griff likes. Now, personally, when I coach teams, Les, I put a massive stake on how my fullback organises a defensive line. Talking to the players, getting his ABC defenders tight, organising the defensive split so that you're not short on one side of the field. And I zoom in on that Matt Duffy decision. I know this is going to make or break Anthony Griffin in many ways because some people are very confused about that decision. But obviously, Terrell Sloan is tipped to be the starting fullback in his stead. The club have also backed Anthony Griffin for another year before a ball has been kicked. So I think Anthony Griffin is really turning this into his club now and into his team. So my first instinct is to look at the Matt Duffy, Terrell Sloan decision. My second instinct is to look at Ben Hunt, a player that has copped his fair share, and I don't think things have been quite the same for him in the media since he dropped that ball in the golden point period of the NRL Grand Final. But Ben Hunt's a good player. He's an Origin player. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on him at St George, but with a bit of luck now, he's going to have some stability around him at the scrum base anyway. And I think he will just start to really get a hold of this team the longer Anthony Griffin and his coaching staff are in play, because they will become more in tune with each other. I also think, and I've already alluded to this, the ages of some of the new recruits, that's the third thing that I want to focus on. And I think Burgess and Woods, even though they're probably not the two best front rowers that you sign from anywhere, you're not the first two you'd pick for any side. They are damn good footballers, and they're solid footballers. Another thing I noticed in the trials, and I made note of in the trials, is that they had one player sin bin and one player sent off in next to no time in the trial, Terrell Fuimono. Terrell Fuimono, I've coached in the past, got sent, and if I remember rightly, it was Sully who got sin bin. Now, that suggests to me they're coming out with a bit more of an aggressive approach in defence. They conceded an average of 26 points a game last year. They were the sixth worst defensive team in the competition. Again, using Griffin as a coach and looking at his history, particularly at the Broncos and Penrith, I think a lot of his recruits are aimed at stiffening up that defence too. And I think his decision around a fullback is about stiffening up a defence too. So, as watchers of the game, we tend to focus more on the attacking side of the ball. I think that team's got a bit more starch in it because of some of those people in the column on the left and the decision in and around Matt Duffy and Terrell Sloan. If it's about defence, which I believe may have been leaked to the media on purpose, then this is going to be a good indicator of how well they travel early in the year if their defence starts to do some shutouts or close to shutouts.
Yeah, I can agree with you there. Like, I wasn't really thinking of that Matt Duffy exit like that at all, but you're right. It's going to help their defence so much going into next year, and it's going to be a very interesting year for St George. They could make it or break it, as you say. They have got some good recruits. Out of these guys, Tyrell Sloan, Jaden Sullivan, and Talatau Mo, the youngsters that are coming through, where do you think they'll sort of fit into the side going into next year? Because we've seen a bunch of them been put in different positions last year. Jaden Sullivan's been a 5'8". He's been playing a lot of hooker. Talatau Mo was in the centres when he's a 5'8". Even Tyrell Sloan was on the wing for one of the trial games there as well. Where do you think these guys sort of fit into the side going into this year?
Well, Terrell's obviously got the jump on the one jersey, so it's his to lose. I think Griffin likes versatility as well. I think that's one of the reasons that the players move around a lot, because when you are a team full of versatile players, it can actually save you some interchanges sometimes. So, for example, if a front rower can move into the back row, that saves you an interchange because you can move them into the back row at some point and rotate them on the front rower, for example. It's a hard question to answer that. I think you'll see a little bit of to-ing and throwing in the six jumper, so that you might see Sullivan back in there at some point, or in between that and the 9 jumper. I think as much as I talked about the defence, St. George have also got to get the points for column up as well, so they need a little bit more creativity. And one of the ways they're going to get that is by moving the pivotal positions around. And I saw a couple of things in the St. George team last year that suggest that that might be what their sort of plan is. You remember Ben Hunt would move from 7 to 9, etc. And I think sometimes, I might be wrong, I'm sure he packed in at lock at some point. So if you move those pivots around, it can keep the opposition guessing. So as much as they've got to get that 26 average down, they've also got to get that 20 up. Ideally, it'd look something like 26-4 and 14 against if they're going to be a winning team. So I think you'll see a bit of chopping and changing, but I do feel Ben Hunt will stay at 7. So I think a lot of it will come down to how Hunt wants to play and how he feels. Well, it also depends how well Sloan connects with that scrum base.
I agree in the fact that Tyrell Sloan's got the one jumper. Just speaking on Ben Hunt, there's been a lot of discussion. A lot of people say he's a better 9. A lot of people say he's a better 7. I know that Andrew McCullough's got that 9 spot down pat, so obviously Ben Hunt's going to be 7 jumper. But what are your thoughts on that? He played Origin at 9 and had probably one of the best Origin years that he's had in a while. What are your thoughts? Is Ben Hunt for you a better 7 or a better 9?
Better 7. I think he's a good 9, and I think McCulloch is obviously not a spring chicken anymore. He's a fine footballer, very consistent. Ask any forward who plays rugby league, and they want the ball in the same spot all the time. Andrew McCulloch puts it exactly where he wants, where the front rowers want it, where the back rowers want it, where the halves want it. If you put your hands up, it'll go into your hands. He knows how to sniff around the ruck, but he's not getting any younger. So what somebody like Ben Hunt can do is go in later in the half and provide a little bit of spark out of dummy half, because he is a good hooker as well. I think he is a good 5% better as a half, though. I think this is going to be Ben Hunt's team. And I also think that Hunt and Griffin have a strong relationship, probably from the time in Brisbane when I'm sure they were together. I think this team is getting moulded around Ben Hunt, and I think he is best positioned to play in the half jumper because of that, with an option to move into 9. Because if you think of the scrum base and the spine, a team that starts with McCulloch at 9 and Hunt at 7 is going to be stronger than if Hunt is at 9 and McCulloch's on a bench or sat in the grandstand. And I think starting those games, can you imagine a front row that contains Burgess, Woods and McCulloch? There's an awful lot of experience there. And when you are breaking down the game, when you are in those crunch moments, there's a lot worse front rows running around than George Burgess, McCulloch and Aaron Woods. And then if the opposition feel like they've got over the top of them 3, if all of a sudden Ben Hunt is dropped in the middle of that to provide a bit more spark around the ruck, then it can cause some havoc for opposition defences. So to answer your question, I feel Hunt is a better 7 than he is a 9, but I think he's a damn good 9 as well. So I think, like I said earlier, I think Griffin is happily moving his pivotal positions around for a reason and with a strategy in mind.
Yeah, for sure. It will definitely be an easy, a very strange and very interesting season for St. George. Speaking about George and Aaron Woods, do you see them starting or do you see them coming off the bench? Would you rather them coming off the bench as experience or starting in the front row and laying a platform?
When I choose my forward pack, Les, if I've got 4 quality front rowers, I actually like to, and this is no disrespect to any of them, but the ones that are going to make less impact, I actually like them to start. Because what I want them to do is soak up some of the pressure so that my players with more impact can come on and replace them and start to make some inroads around the ruck. So that's how I would manage it. And I don't necessarily know if Burgess and Woods come as a package. I think one of them probably needs to be on the field at all times to add that starch, or most of the 80 minutes anyway. You'll have to remind me who else is in the front row there.
Well, they've got George and Aaron for sure. Blake Laurie's another one. He's a young gun coming through. That's a ripe front rower. Jack DeBellin as well. I think he'll play front row, depending
Yes.
on if Jack Bird plays lock for the season. That's what I'm hearing at
Well,
the moment.
DeBellin's like a new signing again.
Yeah, it's
You could almost put him in that left column.
yeah. I could, to be honest. But yeah, he was sensational when he came back. I could
Yeah.
tell that he had a little bit of an impact on that side. He looks
Yeah.
ripe and ready to go, and he's what,
Yeah.
late 20s, early 30s.
Aaron Woods, I think, is a bit more of a starting front rower. Just thinking to the way he plays, a bit more of a starting front rower. George Burgess may be suited to coming off the bench a bit more. Can you imagine Burgess and Jack DeBellin coming off the bench 20 minutes into a game? You think you've got over the top of their pack, and then Burgess and DeBellin come on. And DeBellin probably wouldn't have to come off after that. You could keep DeBellin on for the rest of the game then. So, yeah, that's going to be intriguing. I'm really looking forward to watching the Dragons this year. Like, this is the one team that I think are going to, because I think Griffin is building the club, and I think the club have backed him to give him an extra contract before a ball has been kicked. He's saying, Griffin, this is your team, this is your club. And they've announced this week that Flanagan is on the recruitment side of things. They've got Ian Millward there too. They've got a lot of rugby league brain there. And I just think people forget it was a bit of an embattled club, St. George. It really underperformed for a while there. All St. George fans must be either grey or bald or something. It's been quite stressful. And it's not going to be a quick fix, but I think everything I see and everything we talk about suggests to me that they are going to have a better year and they're going to be on the way up, particularly when you think that the season was upended a little bit by barbecue gate. I guess the only question is around the defence, and last week in the trial, the right side of defence was a bit of a problem, but I just think there's enough rugby league brains around there to fix it. I really do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And as you say, it is going to be a very interesting season there for St. George. Where do you see them in the top, on the ladder sort of things? Where would you put them?
You'll soon realise with me, Les, that I think there's an awful lot of teams that don't have much between them. I think, to extend you the answer, I think, the Roosters, Penrith, maybe South, that's another question for later down the line. But Roosters, Penrith, Melbourne, and we'll put South in there for now. There's a few teams that are better than everyone, and then the rest are just slugging it out. And I think St. George will be one of those teams that are going to be slugging it out between position 5 and position 8. I do think, again, and I keep harking back to this, there's enough starch in that now, enough experience to make them sneak into the 8. You've got to remember, it's not just ever about one period of a game or one game. It's about a 26-round season. Is it 26 or 25 now? I get
it's 26. Yeah,
26. And there'll be times after a few rounds when people have a couple of knocks. There's been one or two bad things happening. You need your experienced heads around there to say the right things around training. You need your experienced heads to say the right things when you're behind your sticks and 12-0 down and you're waiting for 10-0 down and you're waiting for the opposition kicker to convert. You need your experienced heads in that huddle saying the right things, telling you to calm down and focus on what's important. And that just jumps out to me with some of their signings, my friend. I think they are going to manage some of the toughest parts of the season quite well.
Yeah, it looks like a really good side, and I honestly can't wait to see how they play. Focusing on the losses side of things, players they've lost. We've talked a lot about Matt Duffy, but out of Corey Norman, Cam McInnes, and Jordan Pereira, which loss do you think would affect them the most?
Cam McInnes, because of the leadership he brings, because of the culture he brings. Corey Norman, I watched him in his early days at Parramatta, and I thought I was looking at another immortal. He just had so much talent. He's obviously not been able to keep that together in many ways, and he's had a few issues away from the game. And good luck to the lad. I'm a massive fan of his, but obviously he's not been able to keep it together in the way to help his football really kick on. So as a result, he was a bit up and down. Jordan Pereira, big loss in a way, but that's just the nature of it. That's the attritional nature of rugby league. The big one for me is Cam McInnes. And he obviously was targeted by Cronulla for a reason. And, in coming weeks we'll talk about Cronulla, so we'll talk about their recruitment, and I think it's been a shrewd recruitment from the Sharks. And I'll be honest, if he could, I think Hook might have wanted to keep Cam McInnes. Out of all of them, Cam McInnes in there.
Yeah, for sure. Can totally agree. And it's going to be a very interesting year. We've said it a few times now, a very interesting year for St. George there. They could be the new Newcastle Knights. That it's not the team that you'd expect to be in the top 8, but they managed to get there at the end of the year. So, as I said, it's going to be a great year there for St. George, and one that we're all going to keep an eye on. Moving on to the next team, the Canberra Raiders. Any starting thoughts on the Canberra Raiders you'd like to share? Anything you're thinking about the Canberra Raiders this season?
I just think this is Ricky Stewart's club. So St. George is becoming Anthony Griffin's club for as long as they want to stick with him. I think Ricky Stewart has got a job for life at Canberra Raiders. He was a legend there as a player. He grew up around there. You've got some Canberra legends in the administration at Canberra. I think this is Ricky Stewart's club. I'm close with Adam Elliott. I used to coach him, and he's moved there from the Dogs, and he speaks glowingly about Ricky, about the culture. Canberra have been mostly consistent over the last 5 or 6 years. I think the big key for Canberra this year, the late, great Pete Mulholland was a great recruitment man. There's some good kids there, and they're just going to start to come through now. He's been a recruitment guy there. He was a recruitment guy there for a while before he sadly passed. And he's one of the best in the business, if not the best in the business. And if you look at every team Pete Mulholland has been a recruitment guy for, their juniors go well and end up turning into, plenty of them turn into good first graders. So when you're analysing this squad, Les, when you're analysing any squad in the competition, what you've got to throw in, because of the amount of injuries you get in the competition these days, is what good youngsters have they got coming through. And I'm telling you now, if I was building a club from scratch, if I was Redcliffe and Pete Mulholland was still around, I reckon that would have been one of the first calls that Wayne Bennett would have made to get recruitment going there, because he was damn good at what he did. And I just think there's going to be so much happen that we don't know about with Canberra Raiders this year. There's going to be kids come through and you're going to think, where's this kid come from?
Yeah, it's very interesting for Canberra. There's a few young guns in that squad that I quite like. One of them being Xavier Savage, and we'll get to him in a second.
Yep.
But I'll go through this table just quickly. The signings that they have for this year: Jamal Fogarty. They've got Nick Kotrick back to the club. Adam Elliott, we just spoke about, and Peter Hollow is a front rower from North Queensland that they picked up, and he was in one of the trial games last week, and I thought he went quite well. Took some tough carries. And played quite well there. Losses for the club. Caleb Aikens, he was a fullback there. I think he's gone to Penrith. Savili Havili obviously went to South, which I'm very happy about as a South supporter myself. I reckon he's an awesome player, Havili. I'm interested to see how he goes and where they put him. Ryan James, I really like Ryan James. Real good experience in the front row. I think it's a great losses. This is losses. What am I talking about? Ryan James, he's gone off to Brisbane. And it's a good pickup for them. A lot of good experience in the front row. I think he'll play a really crucial bench spot coming off and just laying a platform. Demarnus Louis, I'm not actually sure where he's gone. I know he's been in conversations with a few clubs, but I think he's a free agent at the moment from what I'm hearing.
Okay.
Curtis Scott, I think he's going to Parramatta, but there's a lot of going on with him at the moment. He's been in the media a lot, so not sure how that one's going. I think he's had an investigation under him in the past few months as well. Bailey Simonson, Parramatta, really good pickup from them. I think he's just got so much X factor and ability, and he'll definitely be one of those guys that we'll be analysing when we talk about Parramatta in the coming weeks. Soliola just retired as well. Really good front rower there. He started off his career at centre and moved to the front row, and he did well in all of those positions that he played. I think he was a great player. And then George Williams obviously going home to England as well. The win-loss ratio was 10 wins and 14 losses. Key players for me: Charnze Nicoll-Klokstad, Xavier Savage, Jamal Fogarty, Jack Whiten. Any other key players that you would chuck in there, or your thoughts on the key players that I've got?
Don't forget, Croker only played 1/3 of the season last year. you could almost put him in the left column again as a new signing because he's had to replan the way he trains. He's had some bigger surgery in the off season. He's had to go about things differently. You're a young man, mate. I'm a lot older than you. When you get to about 31, even if you don't play professional rugby league, your body does change on you. So he's adapted. He's an exceptional professional. And I also think he's been the spiritual heartbeat of Canberra for a long time. I think he'll come back, hopefully all guns blazing in some way or another. Don't be surprised if he ends up changing position, going somewhere as an interchange back rower or something like that. He's a great footballer. He's one of those I always wondered why he never played Origin, at least a couple of times. So that's somebody that really interests me. When I look at the losses, there's nothing that much that jumps out to me as being somebody that they'll really, really miss. I don't know if you remember, Les, but last year there was also quite a bit in the media about players being unhappy and a few things leaking. Earlier on, I said it's Ricky Stewart's club and the Furners are involved at the club as well, and have been traditionally. My impression is you don't mess with the Canberra. I won't call them the mafia. That's a bit strong, but it's a bit like that. I think the club is bigger than anybody there, and you've got some real big personalities who are running the show there. And I think some of the stuff that came out around certain players, and I think from memory, George Williams was one of them, and Bateman, who's back at Wigan now. See you later would have been their attitude, and if you don't want to be part of the solution, and you're part of the problem, off you go. And I think it's a damn good club down there, and I think that even though they've dropped off out of the title contention the last couple of years, they've not gone into free fall. They still get wins when you least expect them to. So nobody wants to play a Ricky Stewart Canberra team in Canberra a week after they've just lost a game. Because one thing that Ricky can do is pull the heartstrings of his players and talk about Canberra with pride. And I just think they're going to be there or thereabouts again. It's a good roster. Adam Elliott, I know I'm biased. His career is going to go from strength to strength now. As long as he was at the Bulldogs weren't a very successful team. Canberra have had some success recently. They've been in a grand final only a couple of years ago. They do have what it takes to get there in terms of mentality, in terms of the core group of players. I think Adam Elliott is a great signing. Nick Kotrick has gone back for a reason. He's obviously was previously there. The interesting one is Jamal Fogarty. Now, if you look at Jamal Fogarty's career, he was a massive late bloomer. He basically came through the Queensland Cup. He's only been playing first grade for a short time, really. People like that, Les, they've got massive hearts and they've got massive amounts of drive and determination. So Jamal Fogarty is a really interesting signing. And even though Canberra fans might have wanted a bigger name in that position, Jamal Fogarty is going to be going into this season with loads to prove because that's how he's had to play his football for the last decade. And he can really put his stamp on this team. When you look at the right side, I'm a massive Nickel Klokstad fan. Jack White, and I'm a huge fan. That'll be interesting to see how he does link in with Fogarty there. Xavier Savage, I was privy to seeing him as a kid, and it was pretty special. And that is straight away, that is a Pete Mulholland special right there. That's, he would have fought off several other recruiters to get Xavier Savage to that club. And he is going to be their X factor. What X factor players do is they turn the tight games into wins. And I just think the fixture list, when you're playing Canberra away, it's never the nicest place to go to, particularly bad in the middle of July when it's snowing. I think they're going to creep up the ladder a bit again this year.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you there. It's a pretty decent side, and just to touch on Jamal Fogarty and Jack Whiten as well, it's going to be interesting to see how they link up. For me, I think Jamal Fogarty is going to be that guy, be that seven that's going to take control of the side, sort of like he did at the Titans, and say, I'm going to steer this ship around. And then you've got a guy like Jack Whiten who is going to be that X factor, and it frees him up to just play footy. I think
Yeah,
that's sort of the reason that Jamal has been signed. He's 27
yeah,
now, I think, Jamal.
yeah,
And he's played a lot of junior footy as well, which is sometimes a good thing as well. You sort of get used
yeah.
to different combinations that are coming through. But I really like Jamal Fogarty, and I think that he's going to do wonders for Jack Whiten. What are your thoughts on that combination? How do you think that's going to go? What type of player do you think Jamal Fogarty is and Jack Whiten?
I think what you just said in that he'll be playing a bit of a foil for Jack Whiten. When Jack Whiten wants the ball, he'll get it off him, kind of thing. We've got to throw somebody else in there, mate. Hodgson at the base of the ruck. I mean, he's a very creative hooker, Hodgson, and I really like him. And that triumvirate there is quite a lot of. Personally, in Whiten and Hodgson, I think there won't be an NRL team with maybe one or two exceptions that wouldn't want those two in the 9 and 6 jumper. Fogarty is interesting, but I think in that triumvirate you can afford to have somebody who's less high profile and less lauded, so that they don't really try and outdo each other around the decision making. So I get positive vibes about Canberra, and I get positive vibes about Cronulla too, but I get positive vibes about Canberra. I don't think Jamal Fogarty is going to be a failure. I think he's going to be not a bad signing, because I like the fact that he's had to fight for everything. And I agree with you. I think it could bring Jack Whiten to another level. Because what's also got to happen too, I mean, there's a fair bit of experience left the club in that column. So people like Jack Whiten, Hodgson, Adam Elliott. I mean, I think Adam Elliott was in line to be the Bulldogs captain if things didn't go south off the field. And I think, these guys have got to step up now and really drive things, particularly if Croker isn't 100% fit, which is still going to be a worry, isn't it, going into the season?
Yeah, Jared Croker is a real worry for me. I really liked Jared Croker, and the form he had that 2019 and then the 2020 season as well, I thought was quite good. I really liked Jared Croker even before that as well. You could consider him one of the best centers in that competition at that time, just for the little things
100%.
that he did. And even the goal kicking. The goal kicking was superb and a big part
Yeah.
of
And
just
you've got to remember with goal kicking, Les, that you actually get 2 points for it. And people, this wins games, and missing them can cost you games. And we tend to forget that when we're analysing teams. And Croker's kick ratio is pretty good. He could nail them from everywhere, particularly on a cold night in the middle of winter. Another person we've not spoken about, who I think is one of my favourite front rowers, Josh Papali'i. They've got a really good pack, Canberra, and they've got a lot of competition in the back line. And I just think having a half like Fogarty, who just plays as a bit more of a pivot, somebody who gets the ball there when it's needed there, rather than tries to be the star of the show, I think it's the perfect balance. So I'm all for tipping Canberra for the 8 this year.
Yeah, I think they make the 8 as well, just with the squad they have. For me, it sort of depends on, one, how Jamal Fogarty and Jack Whiten go, and two, they got to sort out who's at 1, because Sticky sort of hasn't really given us much of a clue who's playing the 1 jersey, Chance or Xavier Savage. We know that Chance because obviously filling in the centre role if Jared Croker isn't 100% as well. So it'd be very interesting to see how Sticky puts that side together.
I think it's win-win.
Yeah, I think if you're Sticky though, would you rather be confident in Charles Nickel-Klokstad and sort of bring Xavier Savage through maybe some games off the bench and slowly sort of bring him into the NRL, or would you be confident in Xavier Savage, chuck him at fullback or somewhere else in that side, maybe move Charles to the centres? How would you approach bringing Xavier Savage through?
I'm a massive, if they're good enough, throw them in. So everybody who's seen Xavier Savage play knows that he could be playing Origin in no time at all. Something like Reece Walsh last year, and Gus was saying he's not ready for Origin. That's absolute balderdash, if you ask me. I mean, who am I to question Gus's Origin thoughts? I think he did have a bit of vested interest though for the Warriors. Look, we need our stars in the game. Xavier Savage is a star. I think he's going to provide a lot of X factor. Look, the Canberra Raiders in general have a really good forward pack, a lot of competition in the back line. You know, you've just spoken there. Who's going to get picked out of Clockstad and Savage at fullback? I mean, what an embarrassment of riches in many ways, you know. I don't think when you've got a good pack and an outstanding back line, all you need is somebody to get the ball to them at the right time. And I think all the ingredients are there. They just need to stay as injury-free as possible. The other question around Canberra is the depth. But again, as I said earlier, with Pete Mulholland, the late Pete Mulholland having recruited a lot of this side, you can almost bet your left you-know-what that he will have some juniors ready to come through.
Yeah, for sure. Canberra definitely have a lot of juniors coming through. Xavier Savage just being one of them. It'd be very interesting to see how Sticky does use Xavier. Personally, look, I think I wouldn't say it was a mistake, but I think they sort of brought, for an example, talking about the Roosters, I think they brought Sam Walker in a bit too early. He's a bit of a light fella. He's only 70 to 80 kilos. So he's not a big boy. And they brought him in against a bunch of men. And I think he's definitely got the potential to play in the NRL. But I think they could have kept him in reserve grade for a little bit longer just to sort of get him ready for the NRL.
I think the difference there is that you're not going to be asking Xavier Savage to steer the team around.
Yeah.
You're going to be asking him to finish things off, or to organise a defence, or to pop up in places and play with a bit more of a free spirit. So I think that's the difference there. And again, as a coach, I'm a bit more throw them in, because you can always take them out again.
Yeah,
you know, and you can put them back in reserve grade. That's always an option. And as long as they know that they go in with no pressure, they've got a great career ahead of them, regardless of what happens. Not to make it feel like it's the end of the world if they don't survive after a few rounds. Take the pressure off them, let them play. Surely you want a team with all those players in, you know, and big players need to be on the big stage, is my opinion.
Yeah, it's I totally agree. And yeah, as I said, it is going to be very interesting there how they use Xavier Savage. I know you said you weren't really concerned with the losses and they wouldn't impact them in a big way, but if just looking at this list, is there anyone that really sort of stands out to you?
Ryan James is obviously somebody who I respect a lot. Got the impression he didn't always settle at that club, though. The Curtis Scott scenario has been unpleasant. You know, whatever the rights or wrongs or the issues around it, it's just not good. You don't want that around your club. George Williams is an interesting one too, because he was in such a pivotal role. So in many ways, that's taken a big chunk of what they were doing in 2021 out of the door. So, look, you never want to see a bigger loss column than signing column. You want to try and make them equal. But like I said, in this signings column, Les, you've got a big black space there underneath Peter Holler. In that, you could almost put some reserve graders and youth players, because Pete Mulholland's been there for a long time. So, in a salary cap sport, what you've got to replace the big guys with is always the important thing.
Yeah. Look, I think even though the losses column is bigger than the signings column, I think the signings that they have made, and as you said, the guys coming through as well, it sort of does make it equal. So I honestly can't wait to see how Canberra go.
What we don't know as well, being the outsiders looking in. I mean, I do get a few insights talking to some players, so I do sort of understand what goes on. But we don't know of these players that have been moved on or have decided to go. We don't know which of those didn't fit the Canberra culture. Didn't say the right things, didn't have the right attitude to training, didn't have the right approach to looking after their bodies or team first mentality. We don't know that. I imagine, and I've been in Ricky's company, Ricky has a very clear vision of what kind of person he wants at the club, what kind of game plan he has, and what kind of attitude he wants his players to have. Ricky Stewart's the kind of guy that you'd want in the trench with you if he wasn't playing, and you'd want him coaching. And he's obviously a big rugby league brain too. So in that losses column, we just don't know how many of them didn't fit that mold. I'm not saying any of them didn't fit that mold. I'm just saying we don't know. And we don't know, there may be a lot of what Ricky Stewart sees as not the right mold going out the door, and he might be happy with it.
Yeah, he's a very big standards guy, Ricky. From watching that documentary that came out about him, I think it was the start of this year or maybe the end of the start of last year or the end of the year before. There was a doco that came out about him and his career, obviously that terrible head injury that he got when he went to the Bulldogs, and then into coaching as well when he was coaching so forth. You could just tell from watching him as a coach, the things that he was saying about different clubs, he was such a standards guy. He wants a specific type of player around. And if that's not the guy, then he's just not going to inquire. He's the very, very standards-based type of guy. And I think the players that he's got at the club now sort of, from the outside looking in, we don't know for sure. But from the outside looking in, it seems like a club that Ricky would be very confident about as well.
Yeah. Jamal Fogarty would fit that mold perfectly that you're talking about with Ricky, because he's had to fight for everything in the game, Jamal Fogarty. He didn't get it handed to him on a plate. If you look at he was an Australian schoolboy, so in theory he was ready to go to the next level then, but he's had to work his way through the Queensland Cup. I know so many players Queensland Cup who just give up after a while because they have a family or work commitments or whatever it may be. He stuck it out. And he's had a couple of years at the Titans, and now he's got a chance to put his stamp on this club. And I'm really interested. Look, you never want to play Ricky's Canberra. You never do. It's not a fixture you look at and think there's an easy 2 points. Because Des Hasler and Ricky Stewart are two of the best coaches to get a performance out of a team at any point. And maybe bellyache as well. They can have the worst team in the competition, but they find it very hard to get the wooden spoon because they front up most weeks.
Yeah, it's it's just a huge standards club, and they've got some great players in there as well. The thing that really confuses me about the Jamal Fogarty situation as well is that you hear of so many other wingers, centers, players in the back line debuting, and there's plenty of those, and it's because they've got so many of them. Whereas you look at halves, there's I wouldn't say a scarcity, but there isn't many halves coming through. And people
forget. Sorry, Les. I thought you finished. Sorry.
Like even Cooper Cronk, he wasn't a halfback when he came into the competition, turned into one of the best halfbacks that there ever was, to be honest, in my opinion. I reckon he's definitely one of the best. Jerome Hughes as well. You look at what the Melbourne Storm have done with him. A lot of the halves that do come into the competition sort of transition into that role. Whereas Jamal Fogarty's been a half full time. So the fact that he hasn't had a debut until he was 26, 27 really stands out for me.
I think one thing that we all brush over all the time, well, apart from me because I bring it up all the time, is that the game switched from 5 meters in 1992, 93 to 10 meters. Now, once you create that big distance between the two teams, your half actually doesn't have to have as much skill to break a defense down. They actually have to steer the team around more, recognize rucks, know when to get the ball wider, etc. Under 5 meters, they used to have to produce trick plays to try and break the defense down. I think one of the reasons we've not had as many halves knock around It's because so many of the recruiters and the coaches are trying to coach the wrong game. They're still trying to coach and look at the game when it was 5 meters away. Your half isn't as important as it used to be, in my opinion. If you've got a pack that is good at going forward, remember the South Sydney team that won the 2014 comp? It was basically the Burgess boys and whoever else was in the pack, Isaac Luke scooting out the back of it, and Reynolds, and this will link in nicely to our next club, kicking the opposition to death. And that's because that's how the game is. If you've got a good pack that can get you goal forward, it's very hard to control momentum going against you. And therefore, a half really, in a lot of senses, just needs to get the ball to where it needs to be, or a lot more than they used to. So Fogarty can play second fiddle to Hodgson, to White, and it might be the perfect signing. It literally might be the perfect signing. To win the NRL, I don't think you need a half that's great. You need enough knowledge around the team. You can have a half that just knows how to kick, knows how to pass, knows how to steer them around a paddock. Is Jack White going to be controlling that team, and Hodgson, or is Fogarty going to be? And I think we know the answer to that one.
Yeah, I think Fogarty's going to play a huge part in Canberra's success, and I think they're going to have a lot of it. I think that they're going to be a really it's going to be one of those teams where you're going to see sort of switch modes, going from the team that nearly won the comp to the team that we thought we're going to win the comp, would try and win the comp again, and somehow something happened and they were closer to the bottom than they were the top.
Yeah.
I think this year it's going to be the opposite, where they're sort of starting to climb their way back up and become one of those finals teams again. And I think they've definitely got the potential.
Analyze some of their results last year, and they were really close games. I mean, the amount of games that Raiders seem to lose, 2018 or something like that, they're quite easy to turn around. If you lose by 2 points, it means you can win by 2 points the week after. So, yeah, I've got to be careful because I'll end up putting too many teams in the top 8. But I think Canberra will be up there, mate.
Well, we can change the rules for you. Call up Andrew Abdo. We'll make it the top 16.
Yeah. Oh, they're going. I reckon they're going to do that one day anyway. They want to keep extending the final series.
But yeah, looking at Canberra right now, outside looking in, it looks like a very successful year for them. Any last words anything you'd like to add to Canberra?
I don't think they're going to win the comp. I don't think they're going to threaten to win the comp. I do think they're going to stop some others winning the comp, though.
Yeah, I agree there. It's going to be a big year for Canberra, and I definitely think they'll make the top 8 for sure. But I reckon it's, as I said, they're going to be the new Newcastle in the sense that they'll be one of those teams that sort of scrape their way in, just like some. Moving on to the next team here, we've got the Brisbane Broncos, the last thing we'll analyse for today. And I thought I'd leave the little best for last, little exciting finish to the first episode. But the Brisbane Broncos, what are your thoughts on them going into this year?
I watched every Broncos game last year. I had a Suncorp membership, not a Broncos membership, a Suncorp membership. So I watched a bit of rugby union and watched virtually every Broncos game. And one of the beauties of last year was that because of COVID, a lot of the teams ended up coming up playing up here anyway. So it wasn't good for the liver. I ended up entertaining quite a lot of people at these games. But the Broncos are not a team that can be fixed by a few signings.
Yeah, for sure. They've got a lot of.
There are more problems at the Broncos than a quick fix. Are they doing the right things? Ben Eichen, I'm a massive Ben Eichen fan. I've met many people in rugby league, but only a couple really blow me away with the kind of people they are and the kind of operator they are. I have the utmost respect for Ben Eichen. He'd be in the top 3 rugby league people I've ever met. He used to talk about on NRL 360 how out of shape the Broncos roster was. By its very nature, it's not going to take 6 months to fix that. This is a club that needs to go on a rebuild. I think Broncos have a massive issue. They think they should be in the top 4 all the time. For me, they massively forget that when they used to dominate a lot, they did have the best team all the time. And they were also the only show in Queensland. So Cyril Connell had the run of Queensland to get all the young players. Then the Cowboys came in the comp in '94. That was probably a bit too far away to worry Brisbane. But the Broncos haven't won a competition since the Titans entered the comp in 2008. That's only going to get worse with Redcliffe around now as well. So there's already some good juniors going to Redcliffe rather than the Broncos or rather than the Titans. I know that from where I live and what I hear, and it is. To me, the Broncos are further down the chain than the Dragons are when it comes to rebuilding the club. A few results last year that they sort of managed to come out on the winning side of the ledger. I think it was because there were so many teams that were trying to be as bad as each other last year. There were some really poor teams last year, and I honestly do put the Broncos firmly in that category. And as much as they've made some good signings, I'm afraid I feel that it's only just a start for them. I think they're heading in the right direction, but I don't think. I'm going to put it out there now. I think the Broncos are between 6 and 10, but they're just as likely to finish in 10 as they are 6. That's the kind of team they will be this year. They had real trouble defending last year. We often talk about and we look at recruits and think about how they can attack, but they had struggle defending. They had struggle defending on their own goal line. They struggled to defend on their own goal line. It almost felt last year, watching them in every game, that if you could get near the Broncos goal line, you tended to score. And that suggests a bigger problem at the Broncos. Recently as well, this week, there was a leak about their training methods being too tough and that the players have been. Now, there's a few problems there. Number one, if the training methods have been too tough, well, Broncos guys, remember that you've not really been tearing up trees in a competition the last couple of years, so maybe you need to work harder to get more results, number one. But number two, why is that information leaking out? Why do the media hear that somebody at the Broncos said training is too tough? So I think there's still some problems at the Broncos. I do believe that Reynolds might be a doubt for round one because of his hamstring. So, Reynolds is a good signing, but also what's Reynolds' mentality like? Is he at the end of his career? Has he got much to prove? I don't know. Has he got up there and been a bit underwhelmed with what's going on? Bear in mind that he's played under the master coach for the last few years and was a premiership winner not so long ago. I noticed you were quite positive about the Broncos. Mate, I've got to disagree with you on this one. I think they're a work in progress. And I think the club has got to change its attitude that they demand a top 4 all the time. I think they've got to realise now they're just part of the pack.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting one for the Broncos. Personally, I think it's going to be a decent year for them. I agree in the sense that they'll be 6 to 10. I actually agree that that's sort of where they're going to lie. I don't think they're going to be. A few weeks ago, I was very confident about them. I'm not going to lie. A few weeks ago, I was saying that they were going to be a top 4 side, and it was mainly because of the signings that they had. I felt like Adam Reynolds was sort of what they needed, and I thought he was fit and healthy. Then obviously you go, comes out that, as you said, training's a bit too tough. And then it comes out that Adam Reynolds won't be fit for round 1 and that there's a hamstring issue. Then all this stuff starts to come out and you sort of just wonder what's going on.
What game are we playing? Remind me, Les, what game they're playing. They're not playing cricket. They're not playing tiddlywinks. They're playing the toughest sport in the world, the toughest ball sport in the world. And I don't know. I think that coming out as well is super disrespectful to the coach. And if the coach's authority is undermined, that's not a good sign. And a ball has not even been kicked. A ball has not even been kicked.
Yeah, it's a big concern, and very, very concerned there for the Broncos just bringing all that stuff up. But as I said, they will probably be a 6 to 10 team. It really just depends on how Adam Reynolds goes, if he's fit and stuff like that, which we'll get into in a second, actually. Just looking at the signings that they've got, obviously Adam Reynolds, Kurt Capewell, I think is going to be one that's going to be good for their defense. I think he's going to really going to improve their defense, because just watching him at Penrith, was one of the best defensive back rowers currently in the comp. I reckon his defense is sublime. In Origin for Queensland as well, he was really, really good. So I'm really liking the Kurt Capewell signing. I thought that was a smart sort of signing. And again, we're talking about the rebuild that they're going through. I reckon in terms of rebuild, that's an outstanding signing for Brisbane. Brenko Lee is an interesting one. I think people forget how good Brenko Lee is, especially since he was out for a year with his ACL. I think it was ACL or MCL. But yeah, he's a sensational player, and he's a big boy for a center as well. So he just carves up. I thought he was really good in that trial match last week against the Titans, which was, by the way, an outstanding game. Jordan Pereira, very interesting signing there. And again, they've obviously seen some potential in him. I see a bit of potential in him and a bit of attacking upside as well. I thought he was unreal for St. George, and sort of confused me again why they let him go. We talked about St. George before. Billy Walters. I thought Billy Walters it would be a good signing, and people are going to it's going to be the Nathan Cleary effect. It's going to be a lot of people giving Kevy Walters a bit of Barney, because Billy Walters is most likely going to be the number 6, and it's nothing about Kevy. It's about Billy Walters, and he's got so much potential, and he's probably been one of the halves for me that's really standing out at the moment in these trial games. Ryan James as well, great signing. Again, we talked about him before, but great experience there for Brisbane. And then Tamari Martin as well, who's on a training trial. I'd love to see him come back and play some football for the Broncos. It'd be very interesting to see if he gets a crack in the 14 jumper or even at 6. Losses, we've got Anthony Milford, Tavita Pangai Jr., which I think is a big one. Isaiah Tass, he's gone to South now. I'm pretty sure that he's a half, so he could be in contention for that 7 or maybe even a 6 jersey, depending on how that slide sort of goes out. I think he can play in the centers as well. John Asiata, I thought that was a bit of a strange one. It's not one of the losses that really stands out, but it's a loss in terms of forwards. I think it's a bit of a big one. Ethan Bullymore.
That's a big one. That's a big one. He made some good impact when he came off the bench last year, mate. I remember a couple of times, because where I used to say it was a bit of a distance away, I used to say, "Who's that there? Who's that there?" And it was him. It was Ethan Bullymore. I'd get the number and then check my phone what number, and it was him. He impressed me the way he carried the football, mate. And you look on the flip side, he's ended up going to Manly. I mean, Manly have got a great history of recruitment under Des Hasler. They built a couple of premiership winning squads with Crusher Cleal there, a good friend of mine, and he's an astute signing for Manly. I think that's a massive loss.
Yeah, it's a big loss, especially for young guys coming through, and especially in that forward spot. I wouldn't say it's something they lack, because they have got a good sort of they've got good forwards coming through there, but yeah, definitely a big loss. Ethan Bullymore. Xavier Coates, I thought was a massive one. I'm surprised that Brisbane let him go. He was probably one of the most talented players in the back line at one stage. He was just carving up.
That was a big blow.
2 years in a row.
Because I live up here, mate, so I'm surrounded by people who support Brisbane. And when that news came through, some of them we thought, geez, three of them were saying, what's happening to our club, basically. That was the one that really rocked everybody up here.
He was so talented for them. And I'm surprised that Brisbane didn't at least, I don't know if it's a salary cap thing or whatever. I know they were interested in signing Reynolds, Capewell. Maybe it was the fact that they thought that they couldn't keep him in the side. But, geez, I'd be letting blokes go to keep a guy like Xavier Coates.
Maybe he didn't want to stay, mate. Maybe he didn't want to stay. And I think one thing we've not spoken about with all these losses, we keep talking about it as if it's the club's decision. Mate, the way player agents are and the way some of these players are, they're almost like consumers who go to the highest bidder or the best bidder or to the best program, the best culture. And you've got to ask yourself, why is Tavita Pangai Jr. Xavier Coates, Ethan Bullimore leaving Brisbane as well. So we don't know the full story. Obviously, Brisbane Broncos aren't going to announce, oh, Ethan Bullimore left because he hates our culture. But, we don't know. This adds to the theory, mate, about them not being quite ready, mate, to challenge the honours.
It's very interesting.
I mean, just look at the list, mate. Look how many ins and outs there are. It takes a few years to build a premiership team, and even when you've built a premiership team, it doesn't mean you're going to win the premiership. It means you're going to be there or thereabouts.
Yeah,
there's 7 new signings there in your signings list. Tamari Martin is a maybe because don't forget he was retired. I don't think Ryan James is the best prop forward in the world. He's not somebody you're considering, but he's not a bad player. Billy Walters, he might have done all right, okay, in some trials and whatnot, but again, I mean, how many other clubs were competing with Brisbane for Billy Walters' signature?
Yeah, probably not many.
Jordan Pereira, good signing. Bren Coley, good signing. Kurt Catewell, a good signing. Adam Reynolds is not a spring chicken. How many halves have the Broncos had in the last couple of years? The season just gone, the Broncos changed halves more than they changed their own underpants. There were so many different combinations. Like they're still talking about it now. I was looking at some media reports and they reckon Kevy doesn't know he's starting 6 and 7. And this has been one of the big downfalls of the Kevin Walters era for me, the chopping and changing. If that's true, I don't know. I'm just saying it's been one of the downfalls. They need some stability there. I look at Anthony Milford. All they ever tried to do with Anthony Milford was put a square peg in a round hole. Milford is an instinct player, so let him play with his instincts. Let him run. His instinct is to run. So don't ask him to organise. They totally mismanaged that. In the last few years, they've had Corey Pates, Tana Boyd, the fella who ended up going to the Warriors, Nicarima. They're just 3 names I can just think of whether in the halves at some point. What the Broncos do have up their sleeve, and they seem to be managing it a bit better recently, is the Queensland Cup players that come up. So I think Gamble should be in your key players for 2022. His development this year is going to be really crucial. And he will be he'll be in one of the pivotal positions at some point. I see this as a club in transition. And that's why I stopped short of saying what you did, Les, about them looking red hot. I think they look better, but I still look at that defensive side of the ball. Defense is an attitude, and what these new players need to do is bring that defensive attitude with them. I remember a game against the Bulldogs where it almost seemed that they were trying to be as bad as each other, and Broncos basically just scored more points than the Broncos. That was how they won the game. I know that sounds a bit obvious, but the Bulldogs scored a few, so the Broncos scored a few more, and it just spoke volumes to me that this team wasn't capable of closing out games through their defense. Kevin Walters does have a bit of the Ricky Stewarts and the Des Haslers about him, that he can fire up a team if they're struggling. I remember the game against Penrith when they nearly rolled them at Suncorp. They had a few tough weeks and all of a sudden they nearly rolled Penrith. There was another game a bit later, I forget which game it was, but they won a game and you thought, geez, I thought Ben Eichen was their best signing last year. He obviously changed some things at the club. I think the Ben Eichen and Kevin Walters relationship is crucial this year. I'm not convinced Kevin will still be the coach at the end of this year. I've got to be honest, and that's nothing personal against Kev or about his coaching. I'm just not so sure he will be. I just get that feeling. I mean, if things are leaking out of the joint and a ball hasn't been kicked, I mean, what kind of problems have they got there?
Yeah, it's very interesting, Brisbane, and I definitely didn't think of them this way. Even before we talked, I was thinking that they were a big powerhouse and someone to worry about going into this season. And some parts of me still think they are, but some parts of me are sort of starting to agree with what you're saying again with the leaked media things. And, as you said, Adam Reynolds at the end of his peak as a South Sydney supporter, I was spewing. South Sydney, every South Sydney supporter I spoke to was spewing when he left. But then you sort of start to see all these injuries that he's copping up. And I remember talking to a couple of guys that were inside the SG ball camps and just, dads of my dad's mates who sort of are involved in South in some way. And he had hip flex injuries and leg injuries throughout the season as well. So, and he also had that game, I think it was a game before the grand final, or maybe it was even the grand final, where he had a bad leg and he wasn't doing any goal kicking. He wasn't doing any in-play kicking. He was very quiet in the kicking department. And then the next game, obviously in the grand final, it was actually the game before the grand final, but in the grand final, he sort of started to kick a little bit more, but we weren't seeing the best of him. I think this is a longer issue, and I think South have sort of picked up that he has got some sort of injury that could, I won't say it will, and this is going to sound super controversial, but so I think South may have picked up that he has had some injury for quite some time and said, hey,
maybe
look, we're going to test you on you can test yourself on the market. And again, we don't know outside. It's just outside looking in. We don't know if Adam Reynolds' manager wanted him to leave that club. I know that he wasn't happy with the contract being a 1-year deal.
Well, don't they have a policy that they don't offer anybody over their last contract? They don't ever offer anybody over a 1-year deal or something like that. Don't they have
deals until the end? I think it was the same with John Sutton and and even Sam Burgess. I think it was only a 1-year deal towards the end.
I mean, fair play to South. I mean, since 2013-ish, they've always been in the top echelons of this sport. So people talk about Melbourne and Penrith and Roosters. Souths have been there or thereabouts too, all that time. They haven't dipped out the 8, have they?
No, I don't
during
think
that
they have.
time. Right, so
might have been 1 or 2, but I don't think they have.
Yeah,
really.
They're a standard bearer of this competition, and that's not just about Wayne Bennett. That's about things that are underneath the organisation too. But we're not here to talk about South. But obviously, that suggests to me that there's something. I agree with you that there's a bit more behind this Reynolds thing, because as a fan, and you're looking at it, you think, why the hell have they got rid of him? But there's just so much more that goes into it, and that's why you've got to dig deeper with this Broncos scenario too. It's not that clear cut to me. Don't get me wrong; they could sling a few wins together. Things could go well, and they could be in the 8, and everyone be saying, Lee, what's your, why were you so down on them, this, that, and the other? But to me, mate, anybody can get in the 8. I mean, you get into the top 8, it means you're halfway up the ladder. It means you're a mid ladder mediocrity if you're in 8th, if you ask me. And since the history of the top 8, there's only been, from memory, 1 team or 2 teams get close to winning a grand final. That was Parramatta and North Queensland Cowboys from 7th or 8th. So you only have to win 50% of your games to get in the 8. You only have to win 1 in 2 games to be within cooey of getting in the 8. And I don't think that's too big a jump for the Broncos. I do, however, think that they're not going to win a premiership. There's still a long way to go to build the club in the way that it should be built. I think they need to reform their club as a competing club that has to fight for every signing. I mean, they have to fight Redcliffe now and the Gold Coast Titans for every kid in South East Queensland. Not only that, the Sydney clubs have more involvement up here than they ever have. I've been up here a decade and I've seen it increase. Right? A lot of my assistant coaches from different places have now got jobs working as scouts for Sydney NRL sides. And they live within 40 kilometres of my house up here in Brisbane. So the Broncos can't live on the 80s and 90s anymore. Under Ben Aiken, They've got a great person that knows a lot about governance, who knows a lot about roster management, or at least he used to talk about that on NRL 360 a lot anyway. I have a lot of faith in him as an operator. I think even he would know that they are nowhere near the finished article. There is obviously doubts over the coach as well. I mean, what's his record? Other coaches have done better at the Catalans in Super Leagues since Kevy left. He didn't have a fantastic Origin record. You could argue he got them in a period of transition from some of the big hitters, but he wasn't a dominant Queensland coach. He's improved the Broncos a little bit, but I don't think anybody who goes to Suncorp Stadium was happy with that season last year. They saw it improve, but anybody who knows the NRL, anybody who watched the NRL realised there was a big chunk of real poor sides last year. I mean, the Bulldogs, the Tigers, sometimes the Knights, how they made the 8, anyone's guess, but they did. And the Broncos, sometimes to me, they just, and the Cowboys, they were just trying to outdo each other to be as bad as they could be. The Broncos seem to break away from that a little bit once Ben Ikin come. I think, from what I can gather, Ben Ikin put some professional structures in place. In that column on the right, Katoni Staggs, he didn't play that much last year. He's going to be a big addition. Again, you could almost argue he goes in the left column because he didn't play that much this year. But they've got to defend the football, mate. They've got to be better on that side of the football. They've got to build pressure in games. They've got to stop thinking of them as games of basketball where they can just score a basket at will, and then it doesn't matter if the opposition score a basket. Like they've got to build some pressure, and Reynolds being there will be key to that.
Yeah, well, I really hope that the Broncos. I hope we're wrong. Honestly, I hope we're wrong. And Brisbane a really, really good season.
I've got nothing against the Broncos. It'd be great for me to watch a red hot team down here. That'd be great. It'd make an awful lot of my friends happy. But this club has been through an awful lot.
Yeah,
it's been a bit of a basket case in so many ways. Like they don't like to give an aura of being a basket case because they're big Brisbane, blah, blah. But times have changed, and only the old master coach got them within cooey of winning a grand final since 2006. He got them close in 2015. And their treatment of him was shoddy too. The whole Seabold thing, how that was allowed to play out, him coming to the club, and the way it was dealt with when he was here, really poor. And I just don't think these things can be fixed overnight. I really don't. I hope Kevy does well. I know a couple of his family and things, and know people who know him, and great bloke. So everyone wants him to succeed. But it's going to be a lot more work, I think, than people think.
Yeah, for sure. You look at the win ratio last year; it was 7 wins, 17 losses, and there's some players you can argue in that side it wasn't by their fault. It was just, I wouldn't say luck of the draw, but it was quite unlucky the past 2 years for the Brisbane Broncos. And Brisbane being a team where if you were a young kid coming through and up in Queensland, that's sort of the club where you'd want to go to. Whereas now, Sam Walker, Reece Walsh, both Brisbane guys, really talented Brisbane guys at that as well, now offered other clubs.
And you've got to remember Suncorp Stadium as well. I was talking to my dad about this a week ago about different sports and home and away advantage. There was a time 10 years ago when 20 years ago when coming up to Lang Park was a nightmare. Now, particularly after season 2021, most of the players have played most of their season there. So they'll know Suncorp inside out. They'll know the hotels they were staying in. They'll know the journey to the ground. They'll know the sheds. They'll know how the track travels. They'll know the acoustics in the stadium. That home advantage is also diluted a little bit as well. I think the hard work is only just starting for Ben Ikin, Kevin Walters, and the like. And I feel for sure they're going to win some games. The Brisbane crowd does sustain quite well, even when they're going poorly, but they don't like losing and they don't deal with it well. And I think for the first time last year, I noticed a reservation amongst the fans. They stopped being angry about their performances. They were more, this is just what we like now. And I think that's indicative of where the club is at. And it's going to take a bit more climbing out. I would not be surprised if they finish in 6th. I would not be surprised if they finish in 10th. I would be surprised if they finished under 10th or over 6th.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting year for Brisbane. The key players in that side, I can't believe I forgot to put Payne Haas there because he was such a pivotal part of their last
Best
2
prop
years.
in the game. Best prop in the game.
Oh, for sure. He's really changed the game of front row. He's really changed the game. And it's a weird to say that about a 21-year-old, but he's really changed the game for front rowers in general. Just the quick, versatile front rower that can just break you open in an instant, break a defensive line in an instant. It's just it's an artwork. It is an artwork to watch. He's definitely one of those guys I'll be watching for the next few years.
Unbelievable.
He's a gun.
Selwyn Cobbo. Selwyn Cobbo is going to be an interesting one. Herbie Farnworth, I don't think we've seen the best of him yet. I think he's a talent.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And just, he's got a year of first grade under his belt now, so more will happen, I think. Well, look, there's no shortage of talent there on the offensive side of the ball. One thing that confuses me is their reliance on the lock. What's his name? The fella who's captain sometimes.
Oh,
who?
Patrick
Harrigan. Yeah. Great person. Had a bit of dealings with him. Great person. I just don't see why he's such a big part of their team. I
do like him as a front rower. I think he's a really good front rower. I think Kobe.
Yeah, he's okay. Yeah.
I think Kobe Hetherington's going to be playing a lot more 13 from the trial matches as well. He was sensational.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Pat Carrigan play in the front row now with Payne Haas, maybe starting front rowers.
Maybe, yeah. I agree with you. He's better at the front row than he is in the back row.
Yeah. From what I've heard from just people that have talked about in the media about Patrick Carrigan, he's one of those guys that was a leader throughout most of his reserve grade time. And we look at guys like Tino Fasulamala-Aui over at the Titans. He's 21 years old and now he's the skipper over there. They definitely don't have I wouldn't say they have a lack in experience at all because they've got guys like Adam Reynolds, like Kurt Capewell, Brandon Lee, much older guys. Even Billy Walters is in that conversation now because he's like 7 years old as well, which surprised me when I found that out. They definitely don't have the luck in the experience to chuck these guys at captain. It's a strange one. I wouldn't be surprised if the captaincy this year goes to Adam Reynolds. I think it already is. I think it'll be Adam Reynolds and maybe even Payne Haas. Wouldn't be surprised either if he's sort of that forward leader in that squad.
I think what we're saying is there's more questions and answers about the Broncos already. And they've got to stop the leaks to the media. I don't know if it's the old boys. There's too many old boys in the media, say too many things. Well, that's a real problem. I mean, on the brink of the season starting, for it to come out that Kevin might be training the boys too hard, I mean,
not good on him at all.
The alarm bells just went off in my head when I read that.
Yeah, it's a strange one, especially come out just before the season starts. But we'll talk about a bit more of the positives rather than the negatives of Brisbane now, especially with the key players. With the key players that they've got here in the side. I'd like to talk a bit of positive, but Adam Reynolds, positives on him is that if he is injury-free throughout the season, if we're wrong at the end of the day, I'll be happy to cop it. But if he's injury-free, it'll be a great season for him. Billy Walters, I think, would be the perfect partner for him. 2 experienced halves. I think he's got a lot of X-factor, Billy Walters.
What about Albert Kelly?
Albert Kelly. He's an interesting one. And I would, if he was at 6, it wouldn't surprise me, especially with the game, that Indigenous game where he played really well.
People think if they go to England players that their career's over. He was a damn good player in England for a couple of years and he wasn't retired. It was not like he was in a nursing home. he was still playing rugby league, and I remember them talking about him last year as if he'd not played for 10 years or something. He'd played in England.
Yeah.
And yeah, don't keep him out of the mix. He'd be somebody I'd definitely add in there. Billy Walters, I'm yet to be convinced overall about him, but I want him to succeed because I see a young kid who's just kept plugging away and plugging away and plugging away, and I'm a massive Reynolds fan too. You say bring more positives. I can't fault any of their recruitment. I just think they need to do more of it. And when you have to do a lot of recruitment, it means your starting point isn't very good.
Yeah, it's basically
Tony Staggs. Katoni Staggs, great player. What an X factor. He was head and shoulders above so many people last year when he did play. Selwyn Cobbo, what an exciting talent to come through. Ezra Mam. I have known about Ezra Mam for years through the junior ranks here. Everyone was talking about him. Ezra Mam this, Ezra Mam that. And he's had a good start. And Colby Hetherington, he's another one who's had to fight hard to get into the mix there, and obviously from a good family pedigree as well. So, look, there's a lot of positivity, and don't forget, we're talking about them being a team that's gone from wooden spoon to, was it 12th last year or 13th, and then they're going to be 6 or 10. 6 or 10. I mean, that's the trajectory is going up.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that they're coming from that lower base that even with all that positivity, they might have a lot more to go. And the leaks in the media was definitely bad. That was really bad.
It was surprising. That's what it was. It was just a team in the off season we were hearing so much positives about, and then all of a sudden, right before we're about to kick off, it's weird. It's just weird, is what it is. But a guy that I'd really want to talk about a bit more is Kobe Hetherington. I watched his highlights the other day, and just in reserve grade, he is such a strong guy. He's a big fella too. He's actually, it was weird when I clicked on his player profile last year because I was really interested to see what number he was, stuff like that. It said he was a hooker. He's 6 foot. He's a big boy. I know he's a big boy. But that's just how you know that if you chuck him at 13, he's got the ball skills. I'm really excited about Kobe Hetherington. I think he's definitely one of the guys to watch for them.
I believe he might have been a bit unlucky in that he's been behind Pat Carrigan a fair bit.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing rather than a bad thing. I think it's had
the other one. The other one is TC Rabati.
TC Rabati's a freak. He's a freak.
I found him in Auckland. I found him and brought him over.
Well, that's a good bloody find.
Yeah, he's like Martin Lang. Like Martin Lang used to run at anything and not care. Well, TC's got that, except he's got a bit more footwork and a bit more about him. And I might be wrong. I'm sure I saw him leading the team out the other day, at least for the second half. I might be wrong. I only glanced at the TV screen, so I think he's emerging at the Broncos. I think this is going to be a big year. You got to remember, Les, what happens sometimes is people stick their head above the parapet one season or in the trials and come up with a good performance, but then the opposition do an awful lot of scouting on them and find their weaknesses. They find their weak shoulder in defence, or they find which hand they're not as good at palming off with, or which foot they kick with most, and yada, yada, yada. So the more a player comes through the sport, the more the opposition coaching staff know about him and therefore the players. So the players will talk to you and say they've got all this information about their opposite number. So anybody who breaks out at any point, they've got to add more to their game for the year after, because the opposition find out. If I use the analogy of cricket, that's why some batsmen go really well for 2 years and all of a sudden the opposition find a weakness and they can't score a run. Well, it's a bit like that in rugby league. So there's an awful lot of homework goes into all these players. So when you're looking at breakout players, straight away all the opposition coaches will start looking at them and seeing if there's something strange in their game, some kind of idiosyncrasy that they can exploit. I remember being at Manly under Des, and we were studying Jonathan Thurston's kicking map, and you basically couldn't plot it because he was all over the field and it's only special players that keep adding different things to their bow. James Tedesco is another one. I know we're not talking about the Roosters or Manly, but the James Tedesco and Tommy Trbojevic dynamic is really interesting. James Tedesco's been the best fullback in the game for a couple of years, and all of a sudden, Tommy Turbo was a winning and score trying machine. Well, do you think James Tedesco was sat there in the off season and decided that he's just going to let Turbo get all the freight, or has he worked on this game? And if you listen to Teddy talk, he does loads of work on his game and wants all this. So you have to keep evolving. So, in the key players section, you got to look at how players keep evolving, and that's where somebody like Billy Walters jumps out at me. And I think he's never had it all his own way in his career. He's certainly not a daddy's boy in the sense that, oh, that's Kevin Walters' son, let's make sure he plays. He's never had that. Yeah. He's had to do it all off his own boat, and he's still in there fighting. But Selwyn Cobbo and Ezra Mam, their journey is only just starting in the game. Like they're going to get studied more than ever, and these are just the machinations that go on behind the scenes. And then on top of that, you got to ask, what can the Brisbane Broncos staff work out about other teams? And then that comes down to Kevy and his coaching staff and how ahead of the curve they are too. So really interesting, really interesting. And I mean, a look at the losses column. You're talking about the ins. Milford, for all his malign nature, very experienced. Pangai Jr., experienced. John Asiata, premiership winner, and also played in a couple of grand finals. Ethan Bullimore, we've talked about his qualities. Xavier Coates, talked about his qualities. Alex Glenn was a spiritual leader of Broncos for a long time there. So, yeah, it's just, there's more questions than answers about the Broncos this year, with all due respect to everyone. And but they are heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I can agree. They're definitely a long road ahead, but definitely in the right direction for sure, and looking like a really good side. Well, thank you, Lee, for coming on. It was a great first episode. Great way to kick us off. I really appreciate you coming on, and I can't wait for the next week too. It's going to be a cracker.
Yeah, no, mate, you said would be an hour. That was 1 hour and 42 minutes.
Well,
so I'll have to charge you now, double time.
Oh, I can't make any promises. Next time, I'm just not going to give you a time limit. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed it too. And thanks for all the slides that you did. It was great, and it was good to just look across the list. So well done, mate, and all power to you and your little venture.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Take care.